Okay, I'm Katie Dean, in case you don't know me, and in today's YouTube video I'm going to be showing you how to assemble a French beaded flower bouquet. I'm using a collection of flowers that are all designs available in my ebook, so I'll link the details about the ebook down below for anyone that wants that. But you are also going to be learning more generally how to put together any kind of French beaded flower bouquet. And I'm going to talk generally about choosing flowers of your own. So you don't have to just copy what I've done here. I'm hoping that you will learn something that you can use in your own designs. This does also is something that I cover in a free online class. So again, if you're interested in delving deeper here, I've added the link to the free class in the description down below. But for now, I think it's time to just start showing you the flowers and start putting that bouquet together. So enjoy, and of course if you do enjoy this, I'd love it if you could subscribe to my YouTube channel, and hopefully you'll find some more beading videos. I cover all kinds of topics, not just French beading, lots of bead weaving as well, some actual projects, some inspiration and some technique guides. So you'll get a real mix on this channel, and I'd love it if you could join me. So thanks for watching and let's go. Okay, so let me start by talking you through the flowers that we're going to be using for this bouquet, and then I will talk a little bit more generally about selecting flowers for any kind of French beaded bouquet. So all of these here come from the ebook, so you'll find the actual flower instructions exclusively within that ebook. But let's look at what I've done. I was going to start over here on the right with one of the feature flowers. So this is my anthurium. I've chosen to use pinks for this. So I used a darker pink for the first few rows and then a lighter pink for the remainder of the rows. How you balance those two shades is entirely up to you. So you would literally do that by threading first light pink beads onto your wire, then dark pink beads, and then just make the flower. And then I've got an even slightly darker pink colour here for the stamen part in the centre. So now moving on, our next main flower is this cornflower. I wanted to create a bit of contrast in the blues that I'm using for this bouquet. So I've actually picked out a very dark opaque blue for the petals on this flower. But I've used the pink beads, same as I used for the centre of the anthurium. So we're immediately getting a bit of a connection here. Then if we move along, we have the grape hyacinth. So I've gone for a paler blue for that, so that we've got some contrast with the other flowers. And moving further on, this is one of the berry bunch design, but I've actually used white pearls for this one. So this I'm planning on putting in the centre of the bouquet, where the white is really going to attract the eye and give the viewer something to focus on. Then any bouquet needs a bit of foliage of some variety. So we've got a couple of types here. We've got this very sculptured leaf. So that is the twisted leaf pattern from the ebook. Now that's just nice for creating sort of shaping and interest. And then we've got this simple greenery pattern from the ebook, and I've got that in an opaque light green and also an opaque more medium green, so slightly darker shade. So that gives you the selection of flowers that you'll need to be making. In the written description down below, I've actually talked about the quantities you need and given you a bit more detail on colourings that I've used. Okay, so here we are ready to start assembling our bouquet. Got a nice selection of flowers and foliage, so big a selection that I can't actually fit them all on the screen at once for you. But all we're going to use for assembling these is your floral stem tape. Once we've got the bouquet assembled together, you probably want to cover the stem tape with some ribbon or maybe a beaded piece, just something decorative to finish everything off. And obviously there's various different styles of bouquet that you can make. So today I'm going to be assembling a hand-tied bouquet, which means that I will be joining the flowers just around the centre of the stems, and we'll have bare stems extending underneath the joined / decorative section. So we'll talk a bit about that as we go. Now, I haven't just got a random collection of flowers here. I did start out with a plan, as I said in my last video, so that's guided me to how many of each type of flower and leaf I think I need. Naturally, until I put them all together, I can't be absolutely certain. But I mean, that is the beauty of French beaded flowers. If you find you need something else, you can just go off and make it. So you're going to come on a little adventure with me here as we find out how this goes. So time to get started. I know that I want this nice bunch of white berry style in the middle, because the brightness of that colour is going to draw the eye straight to the centre of the bouquet. So I'm going to start by taking that. I'm going to be arranging alternate cornflowers and some of these light green leafy bits around this. But we don't put them all together in one go. We need to tie each one at a time so that you've got a nice secure arrangement. So start by placing my second flower next to the first one. Get it positioned from the top perspective. Don't worry about whether your stems are meeting at the bottom or not at this stage, because you can alter the stem length later on, so we can shorten them so they're all the same length if you want, or it might not matter that they're all slightly different lengths. Your focus needs to be on the flowers at the top and how they're sitting. So your joining point needs to be right, and by right I mean it's got to be far enough away from the flower heads that they've got room to kind of move. Because they're all on wire, we're going to be actually arranging these into a position, so that's a little different from putting together a bouquet of fresh flowers, unless of course you're working with flowers that have wired stems. But you don't equally want to go too far down from the top, because remember, all the weight of these flowers is in the beads, so at the top here. So if you join right down the bottom, you see those stems are suddenly a bit floppy, and you're going to have real trouble getting the bouquet to sit as you want. So we're looking at making the join sort of slightly above the halfway point as a rough guide, but you're going to need to use your own discretion and kind of work out what's right for your flowers. So anyway, having said all that, it's time to actually join these. And you can work with your stem tape left on the reel, or you can tear off small pieces. It's really kind of what feels more comfortable to you. I usually work with mine still on the reel because I feel that way I'm not going to end up wasting as much tape. Whereas if I tear pieces off, I don't ever know quite how long a piece I need. So all I'm going to do is place my stem tape around the stems, and I'm going to wrap it. And I'm going to wrap several times because I really want these to sit as securely as possible. So that's just got 2 flowers together. Next, I'm going to bring in the next flower that needs to go in order. So this one, remember, I want to sit so it's still around the outside edge of my pearls in the centre, but next to the cornflower. I'm just going to pop that roughly into place, and again we're going to squeeze the stems tight together and wrap so that we've got that one secured as well. And I'm actually going to unwrap that a little and just move it up a touch. So remember what I said about keeping in mind how the bouquet is looking at the top. So I think that's a bit better placement. Let's get that wrapped again. So next I'm going to bring in another cornflower. That is going to go in here. So again, I want to take care that I position it so it's kind of level with my first cornflower. Once again, then I'm holding that new stem in place and I'm going to wrap the tape a couple of times around that. So the idea is that each individual stem here is secured in its own right to everything else. So let's bring in the next bit of light green foliage. Again, focus on the top, how we position that. And we are going to sort of rearrange everything at the end. So you just want to get things roughly in place at the moment. That looks good to me. So as before, we're going to wrap that. So next comes our last cornflower. That again, I'm making sure I'm going to balance that with the others. That looks good. So again, we're wrapping everything nice and tight. And then in this final gap, I've got my last light green foliage to come in. So once again, just placing that, and my awareness will be getting it to sort of match up with everything else. I'm going to wrap all of that in tightly. And this is completing what I'm envisaging as the center section of my bouquet. So I'm actually going to make sure that that is really, really securely wrapped. Again, as you're doing this, try and make sure that your stem tape sticks to an area. So you don't want it extending massively up and down the stems, or you'll have issues trying to cover it up with whatever you're using later on. That's secure enough, so I'm just going to tear that off and take a look here. So that gives me what I'm envisaging as the central section of my bouquet. I will just rearrange things. So because we've got these wire stems, I can just bend the top of the stem so that my cornflowers are not crashing too much into everything else. And all this lovely looped foliage I can just play around with. So we've got it looping in around the berries and over the cornflowers, and really we're getting some interest in here. So I mean, there'll be room for more arranging later on, but as things stand, I'm pretty happy with that for the central section. So I'm going to pause there, put that to one side, and then we'll deal with the rest of the flowers in just a second. Okay, so I have a plan for arranging the rest of the flowers around this central section in discrete groups, if you like. So rather than keep adding them one flower at a time, I'm going to create those small groups on their own. Then I'm going to add them in to the main bouquet. So first up, I want to create 3 groups, each of which contains 1 grape hyacinth, 1 of this dark green foliage, and 2 of these leaves. So the procedure is exactly the same as before. We're going to take the flowers or leaves one at a time and join them with the stem tape. Now you want to, because we're going to be adding these into the existing structure, I want to just make sure that I'm joining them at approximately the same point, because as I said, I don't want yards and yards of stem tape showing that I've then got to try and cover with ribbon. So just be aware of that. And then this joining process is exactly the same as before. So we've got 1 flower, one leaf, bringing in another leaf here, and I want my two leaves to sit either side of my hyacinth here. So I'm placing sort of the top of the leaf stem close to the top of the stem on the hyacinth. Get that about right there. Again, just joining it by wrapping the tape as before. I'm going to bring in a second leaf. Again, focusing on the placement up the top here. That's about right. And join that around here. Now that is it for one of the little groups. So as before, I'm wrapping a bit extra to make sure everything is secure. And as before, I can kind of rearrange things a little bit so that all of my flowers and leaves have got room to breathe. And, you know, we've got this spread out arrangement. I will leave the bulk of the arranging on this though till we get it in the main bouquet and see where things sit there. So I need to make 2 more sets of these, which I'm just going to hop off camera and do, and then I'll come back and we'll move on to the next part of the assembly. Okay, so we've got 3 groups joined now. Got our centre part and we've got the 3 anthurium left to fit in. The idea is that those effectively 6 groups / flowers will be arranged around the outside of this centre. So as before, the process is exactly the same. We're going to take each flower one at a time and add it in. So I'm going to try and position the anthurium so that it's sitting outside this light green foliage. Get it roughly in place for starters, and then obviously I'll bend the stem back to arrange it properly later on. Let's just get an idea of how it would look. Right. Again, we're just taking the stem tape and winding that around the stem. And it becomes quite important to wind it a few times so that you really get that flower anchored. You don't want it to be able to twist. I want to be able to position it and have it stay there. So that's that one in place. Don't really want to tear the stem tape off at this point. You could, I mean, you can use a separate piece each time if you want, but I prefer not to. So next I'm going to bring in one of my bunches here, and that I'm going to position in this area here outside my cornflower. Just bring that down so you can see the top. It's all about positioning from the top of the bouquet. So it's all quite tricky close up on the video here, but hopefully you're getting the gist of how this works. So we're getting that in place. Now things are not beautifully arranged at this stage. That's fine. I'm focusing on getting stems anchored where I want them to be. Then I will arrange the flowers later. So let's just bring in the next anthurium. It's next around. Again, try and get the positioning right so that it's going to balance when I put everything into place later on. Next group of flowers and leaves. If I've done a good job getting my tapes lined up, then as I'm joining this in, I should be taping over the existing tape from where I formed my bunches together. You really do need to press these stems together quite tightly to make sure that we're anchoring things nicely. Last anthurium coming in. Get that in place. And we've got a final bunch coming in here to sit between the last and the first of the anthuriums. So let's anchor that in. And at this point, I'm actually going to start to take my stem tape a little higher and a little lower around all of the stems. So I'm covering a slightly larger area, just because I want to make sure that everything is as well anchored as it possibly can be. So pushing all the stems together as I work and using the tape to wrap them in place. Now that feels pretty good, so I'm going to break that tape off there. But of course I can always come back and add in extra tape if I want to. So let's try and show you the effect we're getting up the top here. Now, I mean, everything is very bunched together at the moment. If I just sit that down. So what I will do next is spend some time just arranging things as I want them to end up looking. Because that's the beauty of having everything on the wire. You can literally pull things into shape to get them to sit where you want. Then the final step, once I'm happy with the arrangement of the flowers and I'm happy that my stems are all secured as I'd want them to be, I might want to look at just trimming off this one stem that's sticking out too far and you're finishing everything off neatly down this end. And then I will bring in some ribbon, and all I'm going to do is wrap that around this section to cover over the stem tape. And then, I mean, it's really up to you how you finish that off. You might want to tie a bow. I quite like to just literally wrap a strip of ribbon and then just use needle and thread to stitch the ends in. So all I've got is a block of ribbon in whatever colour. I think I'll probably go for white, but I'm going to look through my ribbon stash and decide on a final choice. Ideally a wider ribbon might be quite nice because I could just do a single wrap and cover all of the stem tape. So I might see what other options I've got. But all of that is up to you really. It's artistic license, just whatever you need to create a neat finish. And in terms of arranging everything, all I'm going to do is literally sort of pull the stems outwards. I really just want to give all of my flowers a little bit of space to breathe. You know, each one is a work of art in its own right, so we don't want them all too smothered in together. Or maybe you do. Again, that's an option depending on, you know, your style of bouquet and what is pleasing to your eye. There's no right or wrong in any of this. It's entirely up to you to create the look that you want. So I'm going to hop off video and carry on fiddling around with that and take some photos. So obviously you will have seen the finished bouquet, but that should give you an idea. And of course the assembly process will be exactly the same, whatever flowers you're using, whatever style of bouquet you're going to be creating. There's not too much that's technically difficult. Most of it is really down to your own artistry. So don't be afraid to go your own way. And of course, the more experience you have, the more you'll get to learn how all of this feels. But hopefully that's given you a good starting point and the confidence to start using your French beaded flowers to make your own bouquets.